Hello, and welcome to this incredibly exciting launch of Wendy's brand new book. Um, Thank you so much for having me on, Wendy, and to share this experience with you. Um, let's get talking about it.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for agreeing to launch my book, and thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful foreword. I cried when I read it. Sort of-
oh, bless you.
It's
Well, I have to say, I cried reading the book. I found it incredibly moving, and it did something that I'm very passionate about. And I think I mentioned this in the forward, but it um, really highlighted the importance of taking these women out of the footnotes of history and exploring their lives. And I think this is something that you have done throughout your career. You are a celebrated award winning novelist, and this is a serious non-fiction work. So I was utterly thrilled to get the opportunity of previewing it, and even more so to be asked to endorse it. So thank you so much.
well, you were there from the beginning. My goodness,
Indeed.
when I first when I first told you, Pen and Sword has approached me. They want me to write a book about Catherine Carey. I think I'm signing the contract.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. So I should add that the title of the book is Henry VIII's True Daughter, Catherine Carey, A Tudor Life. So my first question to you, Wendy, is why did you want to write a non-fiction book about Catherine Carey?
I wasn't sure that I did actually want to, but I did want to investigate. Of course, whenever you write a work, a novel, for me, it leaves me with more questions that I'd love to have the answers to. And of course, the question about Catherine Carey is whether or not she was the true daughter of Henry VIII. I thought so when I wrote my novel. And I was actually really quite terrified writing Catherine Carey, the true daughter, that I would discover that my belief about her being the daughter was absolutely off the track. It wasn't true at all. But I was really so curious about that, and I just wanted to be able to find what evidence that I could discover. And I knew that she was very important to Elizabeth, throughout Elizabeth's life. And I wanted to find out more about that relationship and why they had such a strong relationship. Yeah, because Elizabeth was, of course, heartbroken when Catherine died in 15. It was 10 years after the Elizabeth ascended the throne, so 1569. Yes, I'm not very good at this, but yes, in the beginning of 1569, she died. Yeah, so the anniversary of the coronation of Elizabeth was her death.
That's
Yeah.
so interesting, isn't it? I love the fact that the impetus for you was almost to get to the truth of something you'd already explored very deeply, and in the realm of fiction. But of course, your fictional works are always beautifully rooted in the historical record.
Oh,
um I mean, we've talked about this many times.
yeah.
I think my first exposure to your work was Dear Heart, about Thomas Wyatt, and it remains one of my all-time favorite novels. It's very special to me. But it's so interesting that was your introduction to this route into non-fiction.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, Tom White, thanks you very much for the enjoyment of his book. He was always very upset with me that my name was on the novel, not we had a very, very we still have a very close relationship. Yeah, I often feel that he's my guardian angel, as is Anne Boleyn, which is, yeah. Interestingly, I don't feel Elizabeth is my guardian angel, but that's another story. um, but yes, getting back to the non-fiction book, one another reason why I wanted to write it is that I've always wanted to write a novel about Elizabeth Tudor, and I thought by doing this, it would be sort of like starting my research for that novel, to know more about Elizabeth and her time, her life, and to go even deeper into Elizabeth's experience as a young girl and growing up and a young queen. Because that 10-year period after Elizabeth became queen in 1558, my gosh, you can just that 10 years was a very, very dangerous period for Elizabeth. When she became queen, no one believed that she would stay on the well, there were people that believed. I'm sure Catherine Carey believed that she would stay on the throne. And because Elizabeth, I see as being very much the daughter of Anne Boleyn. She is there's so much I recognize in Elizabeth that I see also in Anne Boleyn. Yeah, so, but that was a very dangerous time, that those first 10 years. And Catherine Carey was part of that period of time when Elizabeth actually made the throne of England hers, and secured her place as the Queen of England. So it was good to be able to explore I mean, of course, Elizabeth was such a young she was 25 when she became queen. She was in love with a married man. I mean, there's all these, there was a lot of hormones and all the rest of it going on, for her, as well as, I mean, I always believe that she, in her heart of heart, would have married Robert Dudley if he had been, free to marry. And if
Yeah.
that incident, well, more than that tragedy of poor Amy being discovered down a short flight of stairs with a broken neck hadn't happened, if she had died naturally with no suspicion attached to it, Elizabeth would have married him, because she trusts, of all the people in the world, he was one of the people that she really trusted, and she
Yeah.
knew that she could trust him. Yeah, yeah.
That's so fascinating. Um, what do you think were some of the challenges that you faced when starting this particular subject? I'm thinking particularly, the contested question that is at the forefront of your the title of your book. What challenges did you
I think
encounter?
I think the worst challenge for me was being stuck in Australia during lockdowns, with unable to go to England, even if I had the money to go to England. I really wanted to, go through the physical archives, and that was really frustrating for me and really made me feel, um, you know, have I got a right to write this book if I can't visit the really important libraries, the British Library, the BOD, all the libraries that would have maybe helped me even more to, oh gosh, the fact that I know that Catherine Carey was a letter writer. We know this because we have letters, responding to the letters that she wrote. Uh, to be able to find those letters would have been I would have been in heaven. Um, Luckily, the internet, there is a lot of archives that have now been available through the internet, which
Yeah.
was a bit of comfort. Well, yeah, and I did find some really old books that have been, republished. And they were very, very helpful too, so they gave me, the letters of Catherine Carey's husband Francis to her while he was looking after Mary Queen of Scots. So you could see how much he loved her and how also it also indicated how much power she had too with Elizabeth because he was stuck being the person looking up, making certain that all was well with Mary Queen of Scots, a long distance away from court, and while Catherine was sick, and so his letters were saying, "Can't you talk to Elizabeth and tell her I'm not really needed here? I want to come home. I want to be with you." And so it really gave you a really, even though I didn't get the letters that she wrote, the way he wrote to her gave me a really strong sense about their relationship and what kind of woman she was too. Yeah, so that was very helpful.
What kind of woman do you think she was?
I think she was a Boleyn. I think she was definitely a Boleyn, and I but more cautious Boleyn because of all the things that happened to her as a young girl. When because her of course Mary Boleyn, as Mary Carey, got herself into trouble by marrying for love, and her Boleyn family basically turned against her because of that, because
Yeah,
she dared to do something that women weren't supposed to do in that time, in that um, s- status. They were supposed to but, marry for the sake of the family, not for their own sake and for their own love and heart and everything. So she married beneath her. And so that happened when Catherine was either 8 or 10. So that whole situation exploded then. And of course, when she was around about 13, 14, she had the horrible events of 1536 when when she knew her aunt, excuse me, and her uncle, um, yeah, were executed. And yeah, so, she went through a lot in those early years. And then you have the letter that Elizabeth wrote to her, Catherine, when obviously Catherine confided to Elizabeth that they were planning, Catherine and her husband Francis were planning to go into exile when after Mary became queen in 1553. And from what Elizabeth's saying that she's writing to a woman that's very educated and knowledgeable, and because she's talking about myths and referring to Latin and everything like that. So yeah, so and her relationship with Francis was an equal partnership from the beginning, even at 16, um, which is also something that sort of, I'm not quite sure how much I should give away about all the clues that I discovered. But there's one thing I'll share is about when she was 16 or 18, when she married her husband Francis. They were given a property, but they were allowed to have equal ownership in that property. Yeah. So, and that was by the king's desire.
that's very interesting, isn't it? It's
Yes,
very interesting.
yes. So I see her as very intelligent. I also see her as also being stubborn because that's also something that comes across with some of the letters that are about her or to her. She obviously wanted to go her own way regarding her health, but she knew how to navigate her world. She was um, terribly loyal to Elizabeth, never got into trouble with Elizabeth. Although Elizabeth made her cry, wonder why. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, look, yeah, like we know that Elizabeth definitely inherited a lot of her mother's traits, and yeah, Elizabeth could be that sunshine one moment, and then the next moment she could be that storm. So yeah, and when you consider all the things that she was going through as a queen, all the pressure to get married, um, all the people trying to commit treason for whatever. There was she was walking always on a tightrope, and I can understand that she would, behind closed doors, decide to, lose her temper at people, and
Yeah.
the people that you love are often those people who are in the firing line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really comes across in your work. You make these people human. They are not, these are not perfect individuals. They have many flaws, and you don't shy away from exploring them and interpreting them from the sources, from correspondence. And I think that's really important because it really sort of enables us to ask how these people became the people that they were. And you're so right to highlight all of the things that shaped Catherine's life. Look at the events that she faced when she was, at a very impressionable age.
Yeah.
So you can see those Boleyn traits, but you can also see how they've been shaped and honed because of what happened to the Boleyns. It's fascinating.
Yep. Yeah, in a sense, she had an even more painful course in her early life than what Elizabeth. And Elizabeth had a hard enough early life, which also helped her, um, yeah, take on the skills that she needed to survive in her world. And that so much of that world was about survival. Even just, you know, getting to 40 was a survival act in that time. But it was a very, very dangerous time to be in court, especially in the reign of Henry VIII. My gosh, the, la-
Yes,
the, la-
absolutely.
the last years of his reign, oh, the tyrant king emerged, didn't it? Mm,
Absolutely so. And I often think that, for example, Mary Boleyn's the key to her survival was that she sort of flourished in the shadow of the crown, whereas her siblings were destroyed in the glare of it. And I think that might also be the key to Catherine's success as well. She never posed that threat.
I agree with you, Owen. I agree. And one of the things which I was really, really struck with was about Mary Boleyn, because I think she's written so many times as being passive and
Yeah.
downtrodden and everything like that. But writing this book, my goodness, I could see she was just as strong as Anne Boleyn, but she chose to carve her own life in her own terms, and I applaud her. And what a wonderful example that would have been for Catherine as well. And Catherine named her first daughter Mary. And that sort of indicates to me that she had a very strong relationship with Mary Boleyn. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? That you're so right. I think in popular culture, Mary Boleyn is often portrayed as very passive, sort of used individual, whereas, I mean, her one surviving letter just tells you everything you need to know about what kind of Boleyn she was. And
Yes.
just because she didn't aspire to the throne didn't mean to say that she wasn't enacting enormous agency when she chose the man she loved.
Mm.
That was every bit as uh, you know uh,
Coura-
powerful in a way, isn't it?
And courageous as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
She was definitely a very brave woman. Yeah, and I can understand that she would have been over because of her early experiences in her early life. Oh God, I'm over being used and abused, and I'm just going to have live my life the way I want it, and I don't want
Yeah,
anyone to tell me any other way, you know. Um, I'm going to marry William and live a happy life. And I believe that she probably did live a happy life with William, because William Safford was, it sounds like he was a really decent human being. Mm,
absolutely. And I often wonder to myself, and I mean, of course, we can't read too much into silence, but there is this period where Mary disappears from the historical record, and I often do wonder to myself, is that silence happiness? Because everything else that's going in the historical record at that point is far from happy.
yes.
Um,
Yes, I think we can read a lot into silence, and yeah, like you say, I agree with you. The fact that she does disappear indicates something really quite. She's she's living her life out there and away from court and everything like that, and not able to carve out the existence that she wanted for herself, which is good on her. Good on her.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah.
have a lot of time for Mary in the Berlin equation.
I do.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I reckon, there should be another bio of her, because there's obviously, I mean, of course, this is another problem with, being a Tudor woman, is that so much of, the information about, you is lost to history, and maybe what we've got in the bios already of Mary is what we've got, but we don't would love to know where she was during that period of time when she did disappear. They reckon Calais, but
yeah, yeah.
and I think that's probably correct. But you think you'd find some records about their time there, because he would have been a soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure she would have still had friends who were still on the fringes of the court, who were happy to still be in contact with her. So I'm sure that there's probably stuff that we can still discover about her and her life and those missing years. Mm,
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure there is more stuff out there, and I can't wait until it emerges. I think there's a lot more to know about Mary Boleyn,
yeah,
and also I simply don't necessarily agree with a lot of the conclusions that have been made about what we do know. So there is always work to be done with the sources that we do have. I think um, as ideas shift,
mm,
um, we can take another look at those sources and perhaps judge a bit more fairly or with new sight. But yes, I think there is a lot more to learn about her, and
so even
um,
established when she started her relationship with Henry VIII, because
yes, no,
a
absolutely,
big question mark. Was it before, Bessie Blount had her child, or was it after her marriage to William Carey in 1520? Then there's a big question mark as to when that relationship started. Mm.
so yes, it's so opaque, isn't it? It really is. I think actually it tells us a lot about um, the private life of Henry VIII. The fact that um, a lot of this was kept very quiet, and
Yeah,
um, that we don't, we know so much about other mistresses of monarchs, but Henry was obviously very discreet,
he
and
was, wasn't he? He even
yeah,
had Jericho, Jericho to go away to spend time with his lady friends. And yes, I mean, there seems to be quite a suspicion that he did get up to quite a lot of naughtiness, behind Catherine of Aragon's back. But he was a young man when he married her, so he was only 17 when he became king, and he became he married Catherine of Aragon straight away, and he was 18 when they had the coronation. But yes, he did get up to lots of stuff there. Mm, mm.
I've promised myself one day that I will go through letters and papers and try and do a map of where exactly we know Henry is, because there are so many, notwithstanding Hever Castle, there are so many Kentish and Sussex properties which have these folklore sort of labels attached to them as where Henry would visit X. And I would love to know if there's any way that we can almost mathematically work out if this was possible, because it wouldn't surprise me actually if he was courting a lot of the women that he had sexual relations with in other places.
Of course.
Yeah.
I agree totally. Is that one of your book projects that maybe?
It's probably one, a few years away, but it's something that I've always wanted to do, just sort of try and nail down movement. So yeah.
What's happened here?
Oh.
It's okay. It's my computer went blank, and I just
Oh gosh.
that made me sort of wonder if we are probably still recording. I hope. Yes.
Yeah, I've still got the recording thing in my on my screen.
Excellent. So I don't know what caused that. Maybe it's Henry VIII coming down on us, and yeah,
Saying stop looking into my private affairs.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that would be fascinating, and it would
It would.
definitely open up that that door to that because there's a lot of talk about how not Cromwell, it, who was it? His best friend,
Brandon?
yes, yes, yes. Which he was often used as a way of finding women for Henry VIII, and also
Yeah.
Wolsey, Cardinal Wolsey as well. So there's there seems to be a lot of getting of women for the king,
Yeah.
and all these women are unnamed, most of them, unless they had a child with him, like the his laundress, who had a daughter. Yeah, imagine that, how the king goes down to the laundry and says, "Oh, that's a nice little bit of yeah." None wants.
Absolutely.
Yes, the girl that had a very long, unusual name.
I love it. What new insights did you get into Elizabeth? Obviously, Catherine was very close to Elizabeth.
Yeah,
What did you find out about her?
I think, I mean, I always knew that she had friends who were women. Um, and I actually heard this said to me not that long ago. Elizabeth the First did not like women, and I actually sat up and I said, "That's not true. Actually, I've just finished writing this book, and it really what came across to me is how important her relationships were with the women in her life, and there was quite a number of women who were very close to Elizabeth and were with Elizabeth from the beginning of her life. So you got Blanche Perry, who rocked Elizabeth's cradle, and you've got her cat, who Cat Ashley, who was like her other mother, and who was probably regarded by Elizabeth as the mother that she needed in her life. And there's definitely many other women who had strong friendships with Elizabeth. So definitely Elizabeth, there was women that she really, really, really needed in her life, and she surrounded herself by those women, and they were so important to her. They supported her. They gave her the emotional affection that she needed in behind closed doors. They told her what was going on in court. So, they carried the stories about who was doing what to who. So, there's a lot of sharing of information um, via these women as well. So, the fact that these women need to, I mean, I agree with you. We need to really, really explore how important these women were to Elizabeth's reign. I think all the women that were close to her were political animals. They used their power for their families, which Catherine probably would have done that too. I mean, she was a mother of 14 children, maybe 16. 11 of those lived well into their adulthood. So she had lots of kids there that she needed to help out in various ways. Yeah, so, the fact that those women relationships were vital to Elizabeth and her life and her reign. That's really, really, yeah, yeah, really
I'm
touching.
so pleased you said that, because I've just done the research for a lecture that I'm giving to one of the wonderful Natalie Grueniger's events, and it's all about Elizabeth's favourites. And time again, I kept coming up with this idea that Elizabeth didn't like women, and I actually think there's a really sort of understandable reason why people would think that, and I think it's because there's no king's household. There's only a queen's household. So, the queen's household necessarily has both men and women in it to a degree that you just wouldn't have if you had a queen, a queen consort and a king regnant, or vice versa. But that doesn't mean to say that she had all of these incredibly powerful men around her to a degree that a consort wouldn't. But I think it's overwhelmingly clear that she had brilliant relationships and very important relationships with women. I don't think it helps also, and I think where some of this mythology has come from, that all of the threats in terms of the succession that Elizabeth faced or thought she faced were from her female relatives, from the Grey sisters, from Mary Queen of Scots. So I think that necessarily encourages us to think that Elizabeth was hostile towards other women.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, you so beautifully undermine that here, because their relationship was fundamentally incredibly important.
Of course, yes. And I think also the other thing that we need to remember is that it's been the male gaze of history that has written
Yes.
the history. And so, of course, male historians, oh, we've got a woman here who actually managed to stay on the throne of England for 44 years and had been really, really, really admired. Even a pope said if he wasn't a pope, he would have wanted to marry her. She was a remarkable queen, and men often can't cope with strong women. They need to belittle those women in various ways, and so you've got papers written where they're sort of saying, I actually found a medical paper recently trying to, was Elizabeth really a male? She had maybe.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious me, can't we deal with the fact that we have this strong woman who was the Queen of England without having to make her into a man? So wrong.
So frustrating, isn't it? It really is so frustrating. And I think it tells us a lot, actually. One of the areas that I'm not covering in my lecture about favourites is her virginity, which seems to be another aspect that eternally fascinates people. but I think there's far more interesting things to say about Elizabeth's relationships than whether she slept with individuals. I just think there's so much more to explore politically and socially um, between those relationships that she had with both men and women. Than that, it's very it's a very strange sort of angle, as
Mm,
it were. Kind of like Catherine of Aragon and Arthur. That's it's always a question for Catherine, but
yeah,
never really the first thing you think of with Arthur. It's
yeah,
yeah,
yes, and we don't really need to have. I mean, in that period of time, women were very terrified of falling pregnant, and so that would be always a barrier to full sex. But you don't have to have full sex. You can still have a loving relationship with a person without full sex. So, I,
indeed.
I think my look. It's possible that she may have had a sexual relationship in her life, but I don't think so because of her fear of being, a pregnant queen, which would not have gone. That would have definitely, yeah, knocked her off the throne of England. When we look at the mindset of that time, it's so much different to our mindset, and yeah. But she did say she wasn't an angel. Um, but, yeah, I think she would have been very protective, of making certain that she didn't fall pregnant, and yeah, and she also had the women surrounding her
Yeah,
all the time,
absolutely,
all the time. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's not an important question.
No, I think it's certainly one that's worth like exploring, but it's probably the least the thing I find least interesting about her. Um, you know,
Exactly.
what really interests me is, I mean, she was the first queen of England to reign without a man,
Yes.
and that's incredibly important. That's something really worth focusing on.
Yes,
Um,
I wish Mary, her sister, would have realized that she didn't need Philip in her life. Anyway, that's another story, isn't it? I mean, marrying Philip did not do Mary any favors at the end of time. I mean, she just ended up with a broken heart and losing Calais, and yeah. Anyway, yes, yes, I agree. Yes, and Elizabeth did very well to remain unwed and keep, the crown to herself. There's only one mistress, and that's me.
Absolutely. And on a personal level, what was it like for you to transition from fiction to non-fiction? And I say this as someone who is often quite envious of those who can write fiction, because um, I think fiction can go beyond where the historian has to stop. That isn't to say to make things up, but to make um, sort of conclusions about emotions and feelings and things like that, that the historians sort of on testier water when they go down.
Well, I love research. I always have loved research, and that's also part of writing historical fiction. Is that I have never ever met a historical fiction writer that doesn't love research and get lost down those rabbit holes of things that we really don't need to know, but they're so fascinating that we just find ourselves 2 weeks later still exploring just a very fact. So I've always loved research. I was sort of the voice of the work was something that I was worried about because I decided to insert I into it, as in I'm talking about my reflections in it, and I I still wonder about the wisdom of bringing up my husband's red jocks as part of a I thought that was funny, but it's something that Francis Knollys did, um, to quieten a group of teenage young women serving the Queen. Just reminded me of my husband's, how he quietened our teenage children at the time. Yeah, prancing in our lounge room in his red jocks, and yes, the kids after that were very quiet. Uh, anyway, so yeah, it's getting that voice right, isn't it, in all things, and hoping that you have a narrative happening in it as well, and shaping a work, and yeah, it's giving me a headache even thinking. And also the oh gosh, um that I chose to do the citations as something that I was comfortable with, which was Harvard, which is how I did
Yeah.
my PhD. And then I had to change the citations into what Pen and Sword wanted. And my God, it killed me. Getting your, changing
Oh,
citations.
yeah. No,
One
totally.
oh my goodness. And then what was the other thing that, oh, yes, yeah, all those sort of things. It's yeah, it's another kettle of fish, isn't it? And I don't know. Is it harder work to write a non-fiction book to a fiction book? Um, it's there's so much research that goes into a historical fiction novel, which is no, I do anyway. Which is why it takes me so long to write. But with this one, definitely, I had to find those archives, and yeah, to be able to find those archives was really, really important, and took hours and hours locating things that I could use, and reading through, of course, Tudor spelling, which is really the only way I can really do that is read it out loud. Then I
Absolutely. Same as me. Same as me.
yeah, then I can make sense of what they're trying to say. You can actually hear when you do that. You can hear the accent that they would
Yeah.
have spoken in, which brings them very much into your world. You get a sense of how they would have spoken, and yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I've signed for another non-fiction book. I don't know how sane I was when I did that, but look, the thing is that I discovered a person in this book who she's perfect for my narrator for my Elizabeth novel, because she was with Elizabeth even before she became queen, and she died. I think it was 1591 or something like that.
Wow.
So she was with Elizabeth for a really long time. So and I and that gave me also the opportunity to avoid those final years of Elizabeth's life, when it was really a waiting game. A lot of people were just waiting for her to die, and she was also, everyone's writing letters to James in Scotland, and yeah, yeah. And she was, of course, by that stage, she'd lost so many people that she had loved in her life, and yeah, I actually think that it was the death of her Catherine Carey, another Catherine Carey, not the same one. It was her niece who died just the year that I think it was the in December of 1602, and when that woman died, yeah, that was Elizabeth went into depression, and when she got sick, she basically turned her face to the wall and died after a few weeks of turning her face to the wall. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really sad. So at least that's having this other woman. I would be very because you have to, when you write fiction, go into the story yourself and channel the emotion. For me, I channel the emotions, and so it's really hard sometimes when it's tragedy after tragedy, and you think, I want some bright light to
Yeah.
this, and yeah, yeah,
Absolutely
it's hard, isn't it,
amazing.
with
It
history?
really is. And whenever I read historical fiction, I often think to myself, actually, us historians have it slightly easier because whilst I might write that Anne Boleyn was given manship bread or so, or wore buckram and you know, ate so and so, I don't have to explain what that was like, what it felt like, what it tasted like. Um, and that involves a level of research that we simply don't have to go into. And there are things that we will never cover, such as what lit rooms, and
Mm.
um details like that you have to have an intimate knowledge of when you are writing fiction. So I always have um a real respect and admiration, actually, for those who take the time to find those details when they're composing historical fiction. um and you are certainly one of them.
Oh, thank you, dear. Thank you very much. We got a thumbs up. We're not doing this live, are we?
Did we?
Oh, wouldn't it be? I don't think so. But how come we got a thumbs up?
I don't know.
I don't know, isn't it?
No idea.
Maybe that's Tom. Maybe that's Tom. That's scary. That's freaking me out.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
yeah, with regards to research for a historical fiction writer, research has to be invisible to the reader. It's got to be part of the story itself. So that was really, it was nice to be able not to have to worry about, okay, I've got this fact, I can share this fact without having to sort of make it invisible to the reader, because I needed the reader to see these facts,
Yes, exactly.
and see the arguments that I can. Yeah, yeah, it was very also, one thing that struck me too is that the amount you have to the speculations that we make with nonfiction is akin to imagination too, but
Yeah.
it comes from a different place. You've got all the facts there, so you can actually say, well, this is why I'm speculating this is because of this, and this, and so as long as you can, I hope, argue strong enough case for that speculation, then you can speculate.
Yeah. I often think it is like what we do is as historians is almost like conservation, in that we'll have pieces of a painting, but we're not allowed to fill the gaps in, but we are allowed to make small threads that give us a kind of a whole picture, whereas the novelist has that ability to go in and complete that picture
Yes,
in the most vivid way that they possibly can.
yes.
And I adore both. I think both are incredibly important, and they work so well together. I've always found that, anyway.
Yes, I agree. I agree totally. Yes. Okay, I think I've taken so much of your time.
Oh,
Thank
it's been such a pleasure. And before we do go, I do have the most beautiful artwork for your book, which I would love to share. It's truly beautiful. It's got one of my favorite portraits of Elizabeth on as well. Um,
I love that
so
book.
I'm going to absolutely treasure this. It's absolutely beautiful, and I'm so proud to have been part of the launch of this beautiful new book.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Owen. Thank you. And I'm hoping the book comes your way very, very soon, because then you can share it with me. I
Absolutely.
don't expect to receive my books until early next year because being in Australia and I've been told that the warehouse is slow and all the rest of it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You are so, so welcome. What a
And
joy.
um, good luck with your projects.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's
And
very exciting.
yes,
And yeah, I'd love to talk more about the audiobook as and when, you know, you're ready. So yeah, it'd be very exciting.
I'm so excited about that. That it would be absolutely brilliant, Tom.
Be really cool.
I'll start calling you Tom. Uh, it might give people away what we're talking about that I'm calling you Tom. Thank you. Look after yourself, and I'm gonna go back to bed because
Indeed, you had. It's
I've been
early, isn't it?
well, I've been up since 6, so
Bless you.
so
You need to catch up a bit.
yes, okay. See you soon. Bye, love.
So lovely to see you, darling. Bye
Lovely to
bye.
see you soon, my love. Bye.
Bye bye.